There's not a single day that passes without you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to our video podcast, our third part. Ooh, we're at the finale. Yeah. Today we are talking to Hannah, who actually broke her collarbone and then had some
surgery. She had surgery.
Yeah. And she also, I believe, had a concussion?
Four concussions.
4 concussions. So I'm going to assume that the ALC has been a resource for her, but we're going to find out 100% what her experience was in this interview. Again, she just kind of got out of surgery, so we couldn't have her here with us today, so we're going to pop onto the computer and get some of her responses.
Hey Hannah, we're just wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, my name's Hannah. I am 20 years old and I'm in my third year at Laurier for communications. I have always tended to be the type of person that is like active and always moving. I love going to the gym. I used to go for about 2 hours a day in the mornings, and like that's just like the best ideal way for me to like start my morning. It just makes me feel great and like I feel ready for the day. So I go to the gym. For the first 2 years of university, I was actually playing for Laurier lacrosse. I was a goalie on the lacrosse team. I unfortunately can't play anymore because I had a lot of concussions occur, and I'm currently have a broken collarbone. I just got surgery for that. Started off in first year with the worst concussion I've gotten. I ended up having to take 2 months off of school, and it petitioned for tuition and for like due dates and notes and dropping classes after the deadline and all of these like insane, a lot of paperwork for someone with a concussion. So it was really hard. It put me back. I had to drop about 4 classes. And that was like in first semester, first year. So it was huge and it felt awful. With this specific injury, like this collarbone thing, I was mountain biking back in August, and I went to BC and I ended up skidding really hard on a rock, and I was coming down the mountain and like threw myself off my bike so that I didn't obviously die, and I ended up rolling and like crunching my collarbone, basically split it in half. So when I went to the hospital, they looked at it. Basically, they were like, you don't need surgery, you're fine, just wear a cast for 8 to 10 weeks. So as I was doing that, I realized that like the bone was shifting. It wasn't, I'm not going to go into the gory details, so that's gross. But basically, it wasn't healed after the 8 weeks, and so they had to re-break the bone and put in a metal plate. So I just underwent surgery about a week ago. And so, yeah, so hopefully it'll be healed in another 8 to 10 weeks. But it's really been hard with school. School is obviously like a priority for me, and it's like a source of anxiety, and so it's been very hard to get schoolwork done when you can't type or you can't write with your dominant hand. And then, of course, taking a week or a half now, almost 2 weeks off of school in midterm season because of this, like, emergency surgery. So it's all been very stressful, and I haven't been able to do schoolwork, so it's definitely a source of anxiety.
Hannah, we were just wondering if you can elaborate on your experience with the ALC and any of the extra things they've been able to help you with.
So ALC has definitely like been a huge help in my university career over the past couple of years, and it still continues to be a huge help for me. They have really done their best, and yeah, by far like the most welcoming staff, and, you know, they try to treat everything with humor and make you feel at home and make you feel okay, even when you're not. So that has been a huge help, just that kind of normalcy. And consistency as well. Like, I've had the same advisor through my whole university career, so she knows me very well at this point, but they are there to help for sure. There's a couple things that obviously can be improved. You know, like I said, as an athlete, you are dealing with a lot of different doctors, and you're dealing with your athletic therapist and ALC and your prof, so it becomes a huge group of people that you are constantly reporting to, and you're trying to keep in the loop, and then who did you tell what to, and so it becomes a very big process, which sometimes ALC has kind of lagged a little bit just because of the nature of it. You know, they can't all schedule appointments for every student with a concussion. It makes sense, obviously, but because of those lagging little bits, sometimes I can be on a slower return to school schedule than I can be for a return to play, or vice versa. So they do a phenomenal job of coordinating it. It can just be a lengthy process. And because, like, my sports season is only about 8 weeks long, it can cause you to miss out on a lot, which is no one's fault, but, you know, it is what it is. ALC has also kind of dropped the ball on their note-taking services. Note-taking services are huge, like, humongous. The only thing is that they're all volunteer, which is amazing. They're volunteer-based, and that's great, except for the fact when you're in a class and you're in a situation like mine where you physically cannot write, or you can't type fast enough to, or maintain the whole 3-hour lecture, if you do have a 3-hour lecture, and you can't keep up, or you can't type because you're in a cast, or whatever it is. So, that has been a struggle when it comes to notes, because people tend to drop classes, but they sign up as a note taker. So when a student like me gets matched with a note taker, and then that note taker drops, or for some reason they don't post their notes, whatever it may be, I end up getting screwed, and I basically can't. I don't have notes. So what happened to me earlier this year was, a week before one of my midterms, I reached out to a student who hadn't posted the notes since the beginning of the class, and I heard nothing of it. And then I reached out to the coordinator for ALC, the note-taking coordinator, and she reached out to the note taker, and it eventually got canceled. But it got canceled 2 days before my midterm, without me knowing at all that it was canceled, until on the website it said note taker canceled. So it left me in an awful position where I had given this person a week, but they must have dropped a class or couldn't do it for some reason, and I now didn't have any notes for my midterm.
Is there any advice you can give to us and the people who are watching about the ALC, and any improvements, or if you're just happy with the overall experience?
Honestly, advice for any student in the same position as me, or in a position similar to mine, I would say be proactive. If you know that you need to skip a class or miss a class because you need to go to the hospital, or you need to get a concussion test done, 100% do that. If you have hit your head and you don't feel right, go get a concussion test done, whether you have a super important class or not. You can always get a doctor's note, and profs, if you have a doctor's note, are very understanding. I don't think I've ever had an issue with one of my profs about missing a class if there's valid medical papers, I guess. I mean, like, honestly, there's a lot to return to school and return to play that doesn't have anything to do with, like, those processes at all that are put in by the school. Like, a lot of it is mental. Your mental state needs to, it needs to be in the right space, because if you're, like, sitting there, like, when I got my first concussion, I was emotional. I was very emotional. I couldn't get out of bed because I was crying, and I was so dehydrated. And it was because I hit part of my head that basically my hormones were out of whack, and my brain thought I was, like, completely depressed and upset and, like, very emotional. Like, there was one day I cried for, like, 12 hours straight. My eyes were swollen shut. And, like, it's that side of, it's the emotional side of your injury that will 100% dictate how you're able to like, exist that day. Like, there's some days where even with my collarbone, I was in a lot of pain and I needed to sleep it off. I would take my pills and I would just sleep it off because I couldn't be awake, because it was heavy, it was hard to breathe, it was whatever it was uncomfortable. And it's the same thing with a concussion. You know, if you hit a certain part of your head, you are completely out of whack and you are not yourself, and you start to see changes in your personality that can freak you out and that can really mess with you emotionally, and mentally, and you can start to question a lot about yourself and your values. And it sounds super dramatic, but it's super true. Once you've lived it 4 times, you get there. And that can also be a factor in, like, your return to school and your return to play. You know, if you aren't feeling okay, then you're not going to be doing well in school, and you're going to have a lot less, like, you're going to be distracted by a lot of things, or you're just not going to have your focus. You're not going to have your motivation, and those things are very important to find, because when you don't have them, you need the discipline to kind of just keep going. You know, if you don't have your motivation, you just need to rely on, you know what, I need to get out of bed today. And those can be really hard when you have an injury, if you're like myself and your outlet is exercise and you can't exercise. You know, there's a lot of things going through your brain when you're recovering from an injury, and you know that your body needs the rest and it needs to lay there and do nothing. But that can be very hard in itself, to just lay there and do nothing. And it sounds stupid because we're university kids and we're, like, constantly on and going, and everybody's like, oh, I just want to lay down and watch Netflix. But when you're doing that, you're laying down and watching Netflix for a week when you know you have 20 assignments to do, and it's a lot of pressure, and for me, I get a lot of anxiety through it. So definitely a part of the return to school and return to play that isn't in place is, like, your emotional and your mental health. So any advice I could offer people is try and keep your space as clean and as comforting as possible. Really rely on others for help. Like, that's something that's hard for me, to ask people for help, but it's definitely something that I've learned that I need to do sometimes. And, you know, when I can't cook, I need to get someone to help me cook. Or when I can't open a jar, I physically can't open a jar right now. So it's definitely being able to take a step back, realizing and acknowledging that you're not at your 100%, you're at your 60 or 50 or 40 or 30 or whatever it is, but you're going to give 100% of your 60 or 30 or 40 or whatever it is. So, yeah, there's some tough days where, like, you just don't have it in you to get up in the morning or to grind through those 5 readings that you need to get done, and that's okay. I think it's just putting in all of what you got rather than focusing on what you don't got. So, yeah, I hope that advice helps someone else, and I hope that, you know, like, seeing what I've been going through, or the injuries that have occurred over the past few years for me. Also, like, if you aren't a note taker, I hope that kind of, like, inspires you to, like, help out your friends who, you don't necessarily need to be a note taker, but who, like, can't take notes, or, you know, I just hope that you look at it in a way that's not lazy, or kids just not wanting to take notes so they apply for note takers, because that's not the case a lot of the time. And it's really kids like me who do need the notes because they can't physically take them, or they can't keep up with the prof, and then, you know, they're missing out on their mark because of something that isn't necessarily controllable for them.
Thanks, Hannah, for giving the time to talk to us. We all know that you're definitely in pain and not, you know, in your best self. So we really appreciate your time, and that was awesome stuff that you talked about.
I'm sure that it'll be really helpful for someone either in a similar experience or who knows someone in the experience, to have like an understanding of what they're going through, even though everything is different. Having that perspective is super helpful.
Thank you for having me. I hope I answered all your questions. Thanks.